Okay, good morning and welcome to the meeting of the Perth and Kinross Licensing Committee. I'm Bailey Mike Williamson, convener of the committee, and I'm joined by my vice convener, Councillor Ian McPherson. I'm also joined by other members of the committee alongside Moyna McLaren, who's the Deputy Clerk and Solicitor to the committee, Karen Engelberts, who's the Licence Enforcement Officer, and Adam Taylor, who's the Clerk to the committee. Can I now ask the clerk to confirm any apologies received for today's meeting and confirm attendance of those in the chamber and online?
Yep, thanks, convener. Morning, members. We have a number of apologies this morning, so I'll just quickly run through those. We have Councillor Allen, Councillor Anderson, Bailey Brock, Councillor Carr, Councillor Chan, Councillor Reid, and finally Councillor Stewart. We have two members online. I'll just ask those two if they could just confirm that they're actually in the meeting. Councillor Braun.
Yes, I'm here, Adam.
Thank you. And Councillor Harvey.
I'm here, Adam.
Right. All other members are present in the chambers, convener.
Thank you, Adam. Could I ask if there are any declarations of interest in respect to the business on the agenda today?
Yeah, I've got a declaration of interest for item number 4, and I'll be sitting that one out.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. We'll now move on to paper 3, which is a grant of a short-term licence, which is for a new operation at 2 Ferry Crescent, Pitlockery, PH16 5DZ. Members, this application is on page 5 onwards in your documentation pack. For this item of business, we are joined in the chambers by the applicants, Douglas and Irene Laurie. 5 objections were received from Alan and Jennifer Forsyth, Catherine Young, David Moyer, Joan Miller, and Margaret and David Finn, none of whom are present today. I'll now hand over to Moyna McLaren, who will introduce a report and advise on the procedures for the hearing.
Because this application has been brought before the committee because of the objections, and there have been no objections from the Police Scotland or Scottish Fire and Rescue. This is an application for a 3-year short-term licence, and the procedure is that the objectors don't appear to be, no objectors appear to be present today. So what will happen is that you'll be given an opportunity to respond to some of the objections. You've received copies already, probably in your packs in front of you, and then the committee members could be able to ask you some questions about that before making any decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I now invite Mr. and Mrs. Laurie to provide details of their application and respond to the written objections?
Thank you very much. Rabbits in the headlight, but that's okay. Douglas and I and our 2 children, we live in St Meadows in Perth since April the 1st, 2003. Douglas is an elder at St Meadows, and we purchased 2 Ferry Crescent on the 1st of August as a second home. So our homes are 35 miles apart, so not very far indeed. And we're quite taken aback by the objections, which we think may be due to some misunderstanding around the property, and I'll address some of the points raised in the letters. So I think one of the things in the letters was the inadequate parking for the holiday let. So this may be due to a misunderstanding due to the fact that our neighbours may believe that we have 1 drive and 1 garage. There is actually more than adequate parking, as 2 Ferry Crescent owns 2 off-road parking spaces. They're formed drives, quite clear in front of the 2 garages that also belong to the property. This is all as per the land registry, which was updated following our purchase. So we have potentially room for 4 cars at 2 Ferry Crescent. In visiting our property, we have only ever used 1 car at a time. And we also anticipate that 1 car will be continue to use for future lets, if that's the case. It's a 2-bedroom, maximum occupancy of 4. So if at any time there are 2 cars, which we would hope would be unlikely in the current climate of things, they will have the use of 2 off-road private parking spaces available with the property, plus a further 2 places inside the garages, totalling 4. We would also like to highlight that we are a 5-minute walk from the train station in Pitlochry. Which provides an alternative means of transport to Pitlochry. So travelling to our property is easily accessible by other forms of public transport. So in response to that, there has been a problem already. During the refurbishment of our house, which we arranged within a 3 to 4 week period, because we wanted to minimise it was quite difficult to arrange it in a 3-week period with all the trades coordinating that, but we wanted it done quickly and we wanted to minimise disruption to those around. But during this 3 to 4 week period, we received a note from number 1 stating, it's just a paper written note through our door, that a car had parked on their property and that this was not to happen again. So we replied to that note on the same piece of paper, apologising profusely, and we signed the note with our names and popped it back through the door. We actually went to number 1's door to apologise for this, but they weren't at home. Subsequently to this, we did meet our neighbours from number 1 and again apologised face to face for the incident. Following the apologies in writing and face to face, we heard no more and we assumed that there was no further issue with our neighbours regarding parking. This was a very temporary situation during this period in which we were getting the house refurbished, and I'm sure they would confirm there's been no further issue with us parking where we shouldn't have been parking, the other side of a hedge. In response to potentially additional cars coming to the area, we are aware of other vehicles coming into the area at the request of our neighbours to do services such as gardening and window cleaning, etc. And we have no objection to this, on the understanding that these services require temporary access to fulfil their jobs. We would like to emphasise that, as stated in our short-term let application, that Douglas and I will be doing all the regular day-to-day domestic management of our home. We'll be doing the cleaning and the gardening as we have to date. So there will be no duplicating or adding to the current level of maintenance to the area. Our intention again is to use 1 car where possible, but if we did, as previously mentioned, we have space for a couple of cars to come along. There's more than adequate space for if the 2 of us did come along at a different point. The constant relay of people, there's a concern about a constant relay of people to the area. So we're not entirely sure how the occupancy of our home can be a concern. We haven't actually seen or met our neighbours on either side of us. That's 20A or number 3. Since we purchased the house, we haven't actually seen them. There's a 10-foot hedge separating number 20A and us at the back and side of the property, offering great privacy. And we would also like to say that our house may be unoccupied more than it's occupied. With regards to people in the area, we'd like to know, and this is the sort of beauty of it all. The surrounding area of our property is actually a tourist thoroughfare and right of way. There's a public path which provides direct access within 100 yards to the primary tourist spots of the town of Pitlochry. The path that runs directly in front of our house, number 20, number 20A in Tummel Crescent, and 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6, Ferry Crescent, leads directly to the River Tummel and the suspension bridge, which provides access to Hortnacraig, Festival Theatre, the Salmon Ladder, all the wonderful things in Pitlochry, the Dam Visitor Centre and a cafe. These are all, the path is directly in front of our home and a short walk from our property. There's always people about on our area. It's really a wonderful but very, very busy location, enjoyed by literally thousands of people every year. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Laurie. Would you be happy to take questions? Well, thank you. I've got one question. You said you would not be letting your property out. It would be let out less than it would be empty more than it would be let. I was just wondering if you could give some sort of detail of how many days per year that might be.
I think that's potentially. It could be unoccupied more than it's occupied. We have no fixed plan. This is very much of a process we're in from purchasing the house. And part of the summing up, I've actually said that we've holidayed in Pitlochry as a family and as a couple every year. So we're looking forward to continuing to do that. And our children in our 20s love the area, love the outdoor. So we'll be using it. Our immediate family will be using it and extended family will be using it. But we're really looking forward to enjoying this holiday home, but also have the option to share it with others. As I say, it's on this tourist hotspot, if you like. So we can't predict how often it would be let. But it's not our intention to be up there twice a week, every week, or so. Yeah, it's sorry.
Just to say, our primary address is St Meadows, and I think we've always said that we've no plans to move in the next 2 or 3 years or to be full time. So, you know, by definition, it's obviously going to be empty more than it's going to be occupied. But you know, our primary address is still St Meadows, PH2.
Councillor Frampton, followed by Councillor McPherson.
Who will be managing the day-to-day running of the property, given that you stay in St Meadows when you've got guests staying?
Douglas and I will be managing it. We're 30 miles, 40 minutes from the property, so it would be our intention. Yeah, sorry, Douglas.
Apologies. Yeah, sorry, I kind of retired in the 30th of June 2020, and I finished full-time work in August last year. So we're pretty readily available, if you know what I mean.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you. I was just curious to know, how do you intend to advertise the property, and what sort of platforms? And have you got a sort of an idea of the sort of client group that you're hoping to appeal to?
I think that's something that I omitted from my extensive response. I think, obviously we're in a process here, so if we got the licence, we would advertise the property. We're not sure where that would be. It would be a social media platform that we would be intending if we got the license. So we would be advertising. In our refurbishment of it, it's been really exciting refurbing it, and we're really thrilled with it. It would be marketed at people like ourselves, a family, couples. It's a 2-bedroom. It would be ideal for a couple and a small family, or 2 couples coming to do the enjoy the outdoors of Pitlochry. We're not looking for, dare I say it, well, we've got children in our 20s. We're not looking for, yeah, they're not the target market. So
the location of the property is actually, we're opposite. There's a little bit of the river that comes off the Tummel, and the public park, you know, the playing fields where they have the Highland Games. So there's always, it's directly in front. So there's always kids. We were staying this weekend up there, and it's kids are on that. So I think it'll be quite attractive when they see the location right next to a park with play areas and sand bits and all that sort of stuff, you know.
it's not for hen parties, groups of youngsters coming to have a good social weekend or anything like that. We want our property cared for and respected by people who understand.
Thank you for that. I just wanted to ask you another question. In terms of, have you thought about the process that you're going to involve in terms of running the layout? Do you intend to be there to meet and greet renters, or do you have a pack available to them? How are you going to operate?
So again, we're at the preliminary stages. We don't want to put the horse before the cart. We want to do things in a proper sequential way. I have notes of for instance, in preparation for an advert highlighting the tourist attractions around. Yes, we would meet and greet. That would be the idea, to do a changeover of the keys. If people were perhaps arriving at, I mean, we've used different accommodations where we have arrived and used a key box. You know, that might be an option as well. I think initially we would meet the people. Yeah, we're probably quite protective in the first instance, I would say.
Because just refurbish it, it's like a new home. If you know what I mean, sorry.
Thank you. Is it Councillor Braun who's got a question? Have you withdrawn your question, Bob?
Sorry, thank you, Convener. Between you, you've asked the 2 questions I'm going to ask, so that's done. But if I may just ask one, and just follow on from Councillor McPherson's question, that was how you're going to advertise this. I mean, are you saying, well, 2 things really. Number one is, are you aiming for people who perhaps will rent the property for a week as a term, rather than just over a weekend? And are you looking at also using things like Booking.com or Airbnb?
Yeah, we're obviously new to this, but we were thinking we would have a minimum stay within the home, possibly 3 or 4 nights, possibly not a week. Maybe we think that's maybe a bit long for a holiday, but yeah, a week would be great, or 2 weeks would be smashing. But yeah, maybe 2 within a week. In terms of a minimum stay, we wouldn't, as a maximum stay, sorry, not someone overnight or 2 nights. You know, 3 to 4 nights, I would think, would be what we would be looking for.
And would you be looking at using Booking.com or Airbnb, or are you going to stick to just a very basic social media type of advertising?
We're not entirely sure at the moment, but I think it's something that we would maybe seek advice on, as to the best market for a property. well, that may be an option.
Fine. Okay. Thank you very much. And thanks for your deputation as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no further questions, I've just got one question is, are you going to share your contact details with your neighbouring properties so that in the event of an emergency, someone can get in touch with you?
Yeah, we would be more than happy to do that. We also offered that previously when we knew that we had some trades arriving, and we were obviously new to our neighbours. We did contact. We went to our neighbours to introduce ourselves and say if there's any. This was after someone had parked in the inappropriate place. We did go around our neighbours to say, look, we're sorry, there will be trades over here. It's going to be a short space of time. Would you like our number if there's anything you want to contact us about? So we have done that. They didn't take us up on it at that time, but we would do that.
Yeah, number 4 didn't want the number. Number 5 has the number. I've got number 5 on WhatsApp, and for just on the side that I was getting a broadband box delivered, and I wasn't entirely sure if the guy was putting it right through the letterbox or not. And I asked her if she could double check, which she quite kindly did. No problem. That was a couple of months ago, So yeah.
Could I please, if there are no further questions online, could I therefore invite Mr. and Mrs. Laurie to sum up?
Thank you. So we've lived in Perth for over 20 years. We're very pro the Highlands and Islands. I've worked for the University of the Highlands and Islands over the last 15 years. And during this time, I was actually involved in providing rural access to education within Pitlochry in the area of health and social care. Of possibly repeating this, we as Douglas and I, as a couple and as a family, we do holiday in Pitlochry and the Highlands and Islands every year. We're no stranger to Pitlochry. I've worked in Pitlochry within the arts. Douglas has completed the ETAP, plays golf every year in Pitlochry Golf Club. We fully appreciate the area and its people, and we feel we have a strong connection with Pitlochry. We're really looking forward to enjoying our holiday home there in this tourist area and having the option to share it with others. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do members wish to adjourn for further discussion? Yep. Okay, thank you. My motion is to grant a licence for 3 years with the following condition, which is to ensure that any vehicles belonging to the guests are parked lawfully. For example, explaining where designated parking spaces are to be found, and also within the conditions of the licence too. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Are there any amendments? If there are no amendments, your licence has been granted.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the meeting of Perth and Kinross Licensing Committee. I'm Bailey Mike Williamson, convener of the committee, and I'm joined by my vice convener, Councillor Ian McPherson. I'm also joined by other members of the committee alongside me, Moina McLaren, who's the deputy clerk and solicitor of the committee, Karen Engelberts, the licensing enforcement officer, and Adam Taylor, who's the clerk to the committee. Could I now ask the clerk to confirm the attendance of those in the chamber and online, please?
Thanks, convener. We have 3 members obviously present in the chambers, but we also have 3 members joining us online. I will just ask the 3 online to confirm that they're actually in the meeting and can hear us. So, Councillor Braun.
Yes, I'm here, Adam. Can hear you.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. And finally, Councillor Robertson.
Present.
Thank you.
Councillor Harvey, just to remind you, you did declare a declaration of interest in this paper this morning. So whilst we're happy for you to sit in, just to remind you, you're not allowed to participate. Okay. Thumbs up will
Sorry.
do, Ken.
It's not this. It's not this paper. It's paper number 4, or
Okay.
issue number 4. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. I'll tell you when it comes up.
Okay. Thank you. That is this one, Ken.
I think it's not.
Sorry, it is. I'll just settle. I'll just settle then. I'll be listening, but not take part.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. Right. We're now moving on to paper 4. Members, this application is on page 25 onwards of your document pack. For this item of business, we are joined in the chambers by the applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Kazaka. I've got that right. We are also joined in the chambers by the objectors to the application, Stuart Perney, Ken Petrie and Charles Porter. Further objections were received and a number of other residents from Cotton Town who are not present today. I'll now hand over to Moyna McLaren, who will introduce a report and advise on the procedures for the hearing.
Hello. In terms of the procedures, what will happen in this case is that the objectors will speak first, and they'll be questioned by the committee, and then as the applicants yourselves will be able to respond to the objections, and then you'll receive questions from the committee, and then there will be, you know, a chance to sum up. Also, in this particular case, I think there's a preliminary matter, and that is because we received 2 of the objections out with the time limit, 28 days. I think it's Mr. Perney, I think that you'll be speaking to that matter, and Charles Porter as well. So that would just be an issue that we would sort of deal with first. I'd like to also mention, because it might just help everybody here, in terms of licensing committee, in this license committee, there's not a requirement for planning permission to apply for a short-term let, or for planning permission to be granted before a short-term let license can be granted. Just to clarify that. It might just be helpful to do that at first. So the first thing that we deal with is a preliminary matter of allowing the objections to be heard, given that they would be submitted out with the 28 days.
Okay, thank you. Our members are happy to hear the objections from out with the period. Councillor Braun?
Sorry, just unmuted. Yes, I'm fine with it. Thank you, convener.
Okay, Councillor Robertson?
Yes, I'm happy.
Councillor Trampton? I'm happy to. Okay, so we'll move on. Could I advise the objectors that the licensing committee members have received and thoroughly reviewed a copy of all objections prior to this meeting. It is requested that you keep any explanation of your objection to no more than 10 minutes. Additional grounds of objection or representation should not be added at this time. Only the grounds of objection and representations included in your initial submission may be referenced. So I'd like to now invite Mr. Perney to provide details of his objection. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to the meeting. I'll be very, very brief. My objection really is based on the access road to Cotown House. So the access road is actually split into 2 parts. One part is shared by all of the residents of Cotown, and the other part is a private road, which is shared between my property, which is called Oak Dean, which is owned by myself and my wife, and next door, which is Cotown House. So it's a private piece of road, which is the second part. The private piece of road would probably be about 1/3 the length of the other part of the road. The other part of the road isn't actually a public road, because I think that the Solom is owned by the estate being Errol Park, and they do not pay for the upkeep of the road. So the upkeep of the road is actually left to, I was going to say the residents of Cotown, but actually it's only a few of the residents of Cotown. The 2 main people who repair the road are the people on my left and on my right, who have taken it upon themselves to spend their time and their money keeping the road in a better state than it currently is. So the road is actually tarmac, but with people turning in and out of driveways, they create potholes. So the road is actually littered with potholes. So from time to time, we contribute to buying what we call scalpings, which are delivered, and we fill the holes in with the scalpings. But when the rain comes, it washes these scalpings back out again. And unfortunately, when we do fill in the holes, it makes the road easier to drive on, and therefore people go faster, which makes it even worse. So it's like self-perpetuating problem there. The state of the road, which is the private part, which is shared by myself and next door, is actually in a better condition because there's less traffic that goes up and down there. And I have done, I would say, the lion's share of the repairs to that part during the last 20 years since I've lived in Oakdean. So our concern really is that the whole length of that road is used by Cotown House. And therefore, the whole length of that road, including the private part, would be used by anybody that was taking advantage of the short-term lets next door. So that's part of it, I think, which is the damage to the road. It's already in a pretty bad state, I would say. And the second thing is really the uncertainty that we have, which is we're really not sure what is happening in the properties next door. The properties were originally created to be an equine insemination unit. I don't think that ever started. I may be wrong, but I don't think it ever started. And one residential property. But now we see that there are 3 applications for licenses for Cotown 1, 2 and 3. And really, we've got no idea what Cotown 1, 2 and 3 could be. It would appear, and I say appear because I've got no obvious evidence, that one of the properties seems to be available to what I guess we could call tradespeople. And I say that because there are a lot of commercial vehicles go up and down the road with different company names on the side of them. And they tend to go up and down quite early in the morning or late afternoon, early evening. There's also been, I suppose you could say, cooking smells coming from that area where we think that perhaps tradespeople are being accommodated. No proof whatsoever at all, only uncertainty. And I think it's the uncertainty that concerns us about what exactly is going on in that property. I'll stop now. Thank you.
May I just take some advice from one of McLaren's solicitor about the private road? My understanding is that that would be a civil matter. Is that correct? And nothing for consideration within this committee?
Issues such as our title deeds or ownerships and repair and connection with communal roads, or even are not something that the committee would normally take into account. Let you know that.
Thank you. Mr. Penny, are you happy to take questions? Okay, thank you. Do members have any questions for Mr. Penny? No questions, nothing appears online, so okay, thank you. So could I ask Mr. Petrie for details of his objection, please?
Good afternoon. Third time lucky. As I said, I've been a resident of Cotown for 42 years. And the reason my wife and I went to Cotown to bring up our children was for peace and quiet. And it was an ideal situation. But over the years, there's been an increased volume of traffic going up and down the road and creating potholes all over the road. And there is 50% are elderly people. I'm an elderly people. I'm 80 years old. So, and the lady next door, she walks because she has a walking frame, and a gentleman further down the road, he has a mobility scooter. Well, the state of the road doesn't allow these people to come out and get a bit of fresh air. All right, sorry. That's about all I can say about. We're part of a very small team. Mr. Porter and I started it by going round and getting a load of scalpings. Am I still wavering? Yeah. Well, it's not going to get any better, the road. That's the total sum of it's not going to get any better. And there's Perth and Kinross granted a planning permission for 4 houses in Cottown's Gardens, which is only going to add to the problem. I've also noticed some silos and bins. I was in the grain trade, which I think likened to be used for grain. That's my objection. It's just the volume of traffic and the elderly people and us continually mending the road.
Could I ask if you're happy to take questions? Do members have any questions for Mr. Petrie? There are no questions for Mr. Petrie, so could I now invite Mr. Porter to provide details of his objection, please?
That's it. You're on. Okay. Good afternoon. The reason my objection was late was that I was unaware of the application. I became aware of the application one day when we were out repairing the road, and we mentioned that Mr. Kazaka didn't appear to have applied for permission for short-term lets, and we assumed that that was going to end. But later that day, I checked the council website and discovered he had made an application. When someone's applying for a license, they're meant to display a site notice at or near their premises so it can be conveniently read by the public. Now, the whole of Cottown is affected by Mr. Kazakis's enterprise. He says there was a notice displayed in his gate, but no one would ever be anywhere near his gate because, as Mr. Perney said, there's a private road which runs for about 300 or 400 yards, which nobody would have reason to go down. If he wanted to make the residents aware, he should have put the notice on the bus stop at the start of the road, where public notices quite often are displayed. My reason for the objection is the increased traffic. As people have said, the road is in a bad state, and the more traffic there is, the worse it gets, particularly when the weather is bad. When there's rain, traffic going up and down the road washes out the infill that we've put in. Also, the people who live in the road tend to drive along there at a reasonable speed. Strangers don't. The speed some vehicles go up and down that road is ridiculous. And many of these are making their way to Mr. Kazakis's premises. I've also looked on the website. I may have missed it, but as Mr. Perney says, we don't really know what's going on with Mr. Kazakis. But he's got 3 properties where he is applying for licenses. I don't think they can all be in his main house. I think some must be his outbuildings. Now, one of the outbuildings was for this equine insemination centre, which, as far as we're aware, never got off the ground. And if that is the case, he must have converted that to living accommodation. I can see nothing on the council site to show that he ever applied for change of use of that building. Similarly, if any of his other outbuildings have been converted, I can see nothing to show that they have had permission for change of use. And on that basis, I don't think any let should be allowed for these properties. I think that's the main reason for my objection.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Porter. Could I ask Moina just to remind me again about the, Mr. Porter mentioned there about change of use. That would be, my understanding is that would be planning. And again, we have no remit over planning at this committee. Is that correct?
That is correct. Planning is not a matter that would be taken into account with this committee. It would be a separate process, and whether planning permission is granted or not is a separate committee that would deal with that.
Can we take that further down another avenue? Oh, sorry.
I would suggest that your options are is you need to speak to the planning department within the council. Okay, that's where you would have to take that. Could I ask if you're happy to take any questions? Okay, do members have any questions for Mr. Porter? No questions, nothing online. Okay. Could I now therefore invite Mr. Kazaka to provide details of the application to respond to the objections, please?
Good afternoon, Bailey Williamson and all the other members of the committee, and thank you for your invitation to participate in the meeting today. Joseph and I have owned the land in Cottown since 1991 and have lived there since 2002. The committee made the decision to accept the late submissions of objections, and that's why we're all here today. We are very pleased that everyone is able to put forward their points of view. The reason all objectors have given for their submissions being late was the same. They knew nothing about the application. I'd just like to point out incorrect claims made by the objectors regarding the public notice. The public notice of application for short-term let licence pertaining to our application was displayed on black metal gates owned by us on property owned by us at the end of the Cottown Road. This is the only turning point on the road and is where the refuse lorry turns every week, where many drivers come to turn their vans, cars, bicycles around, and where many pedestrians pass through on the core path network. As Cottown Road is part of the core path network, it can be used by any member of the public. Our gates at this location therefore fulfil the requirement, and I quote, "This notice must be displayed on or near the short-term let property in a position where it can be easily read by the public," unquote. Unlike the gates into our property at the end of the shared driveway, which is private property. These gates on the private driveway are the gates to which Oak Dean refers in its objection, quoting, "My wife and I look at it every time we leave the grounds of Oak Dean." And Oak View has relied on Oak Dean's speculative evidence. Quote, "The residents in the nearest house to the property in question are the only ones likely to have seen a notice, and they advise they are unaware of its presence." End of quote. So to summarise, both objectors refer to the public notice of application for short-term let licence not being displayed on the gates of our property, so they claimed that no notice had been exhibited, while in fact it was displayed near my short-term let property in a position where it could be easily read by the public. This reason given to compensate for the late submission of an objection. However, we respect the committee's decision to grant that the late submissions be considered. Well, the common theme running through all the objections is the road. the speed of traffic on the road, the amount of traffic on the road, and the maintenance of the road. Now, I could carry on if you wish, but if you about the road, but if you feel that it's not, if you don't wish to consider it, then I could pass on it. It's just that there were so many misleading comments about the road as well, about us not being ever maintaining it, which is absolutely not true. And I've got 4 pages that I can quote for you, but you're giving me just there. Would you like me to continue with about the road?
As I mentioned to the objectors, the road is a civil matter, and to be fair to them and to you, I think that is something that's going to have to be taken up outside of this committee, I'm afraid. But if you would like to. I was going to suggest that, or been advised, maybe we could just mention something about the speed, the maintenance. If you could just briefly just mention that, yes, and the maintenance. But as I say, it isn't a matter for this committee. It is a civil matter between yourselves and the other residents within that area. Okay, but I'll let the other people speak briefly about it. But I think you should be allowed your piece. But if you could keep it very, very brief, that would be excellent. Thank you. Sorry.
Maintenance. All residents' responsibility for their share of road maintenance, which is to keep in good repair the length of their road frontage from their boundary to the middle of the road as governed by title deed conditions. As title deeds are a legal matter, it may be that the committee is unable to discuss this. However, we're happy to speak about our own involvement of Cocktown Road maintenance throughout the last 20 years. We're aware now from the submission of the objectors, a small group of residents keep the road usable. The owners of Cocktown House are not members of this group. We were not made aware that there was a group. We're never invited to join the group. We're never invited to share in the expense, which we would be delighted to do. On one occasion when Mr. Petrie was fixing the road, Joseph told him we could make a contribution. Mr. Petrie accepted a cheque, and Joseph insisted that he let us know whenever there were materials to be purchased in order for us to make a contribution and to make available any of our machinery. This offer of financially sharing in the cost of maintenance is still available to the group. During the last 2 years, our employees using our machines and our materials filled potholes the entire length and width of the road, including an enormous hole in front of Mr. Porter's house, which alone consumed 7 tons of crushed material. A few months later, our employees were fixing the road using our machines when Mr. Perney approached them and said, quote, "I would prefer that you stop doing this," unquote. Unfortunately, Joseph was not at home at the time, so the job was aborted. At the end of February this year, one of our men was filling the potholes along the entire length and width of the road when a resident, Pam MacDonald, came out of her house, offered to bring him a refreshment, and returned along with her shovel to give him a helping hand. Maintenance responsibilities have not been adhered to by every resident. Lately, there has been more maintenance activity than in past years. In the first 10 years of us coming to live in Cocktown, we carried out repairs to the road more than anyone else. At no time over the 20+ years have we ever asked any other resident to contribute either financially or physically when we carried out repairs wholesale from end to end of the road. So claims that we have contributed little or nothing to the maintenance of the road are simply untrue. The Cottown Road has a long story which I can recount, but 10 minutes would not be nearly long enough. In spite of all this and the many misleading comments, for example, Mr. Kazaka bought off the objections about the 4 houses on our property, the 4 houses of which construction is in progress. Once the houses are completed, we are committed to surface the said road.
Okay, thank you. Do members have any questions for Mrs. Kazakia? Okay, Councillor McPherson.
Hello, thank you. I would just like to ask you this: you previously had short-term lets on the property before applying for the license. Is that correct? Have you run that as a business?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
Just to understand that this is that there was an existing business at your property where you were running short-term lets. Could you just explain a little bit about what that was and how long that has run for? Thank you.
The property has been used for short-term lets since October 2011.
Thank you. Could you give us like some sort of idea of the volume of the short-term lets and?
On average, about 120 bookings per year.
And how many properties did that involve? Is that?
That's over the 3 properties.
Okay, are there any further questions for Mrs. Kazaka? Councillor Braun.
Thanks, Convener. Thank you for your deputation. We heard of obviously problems with speed in traffic. I just wonder, is there any speed restriction on your road at all? Either going through Cottown or onto your site that you know of?
There are no public restrictions, no. Well, actually, the state of the road means even if you were trying to save your life, it's very difficult to go more than 20 miles an hour.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further, no, not yet. No, I'll come back to you in a minute. If there are no further questions for Mrs. Kazaka, could I therefore invite Mr. Perney to sum up?
Sorry for jumping in. As far as the speed restriction is concerned, no, there's nothing obvious apart from I put up a sign that said 5 miles per hour at the beginning of the private section of the road, the part that's shared by Cottown House and Oak Dean, but this is being ignored. So there's nothing else on there. My only other thing is that we still don't know what Cottown 1, 2 or 3 is.
Could I now invite Mr. Petrie to sum up, please?
I've not much else to say, bar at the increased volume of traffic with the Airbnb, and I'm speaking about the maintenance of the road again, is what my job was to do. And I have nothing more to say, only that there's going to be more traffic coming up and down the road than when things are completed at Cottown House.
Could I now invite Mr. Porter to sum up?
You asked an interesting question about the lettings. and they said there had been 120. But that doesn't, I don't think, give any indication of the volume of traffic, because some of these lettings will be for multiple nights. I just hope that the application is denied to prevent the additional or the ongoing additional traffic on this road. So it has to be remembered as well that there are also young children in the road who could be affected by speeding traffic.
So now invite Mrs. Kazaki to sum up, please.
We'd like to thank the committee for the opportunity to present at our case here today. Cottown is a very small community of 18 houses, and as such, there can be differing opinions among residents, which is normal. This is reflected in the scenario of the road. To reiterate what was previously said, our offer to participate in the group's road maintenance still stands, and we hope the group accepts our offer, thereby making it a joint project rather than a you and us scenario. We're really at a loss to understand why every single piece of speeding traffic is assumed that's coming either to or from Cottown House. Many people shop online. There are delivery vehicles. It's not only someone who's coming for a short-term let and that drives a van. So every piece of fast traffic seems to be apportioned to Cottown House, which also is not the case. So maybe also take this opportunity to thank Karen and her team for their patience, diligence and guidance, simplifying the licence procedure process for novice applicants such as us. Thank you very much.
We got on with the mics. Thank you everybody for your representations. Do members wish to adjourn for further discussion? We're going to adjourn for a further discussion, so we'll be back in a few minutes. Okay. Okay, thank you everybody for your patience. My motion is to grant an application for 3 years with the additional condition that we would request that you supply your contact details with the next door neighbours in case there's and they need to contact you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Are there any amendments to the motion? If there are no amendments to the motion, the licence has been granted for 3 years. Thank you. Thank you very much for your time, everybody. Thank you. Could I request the attendees in relation to the Gushart Cottage Strathtype at Lockyer brought to the table? Okay, thank you. Members, we move on to the final paper today, which is a grant of a short-term licence. Members, this application is page 47 onwards of your document pack. For this item of business, we are joined today in the chambers by the applicant, Mr. Alexander Bruce, along with his agent, Sarah Cooper. We're also joined in the chambers by an objector to the application, Grain Forsyth. 2 further objections were received from Alison Forsyth and Jeff Porter, who are not present today. I will now hand over to Monica McLaren, who will introduce the report and advise on the procedures for the hearing.
Yes, the procedure for the hearing is as an objector, you'll be able to outline what your objection is and then receive questions from the committee members. And then as the applicant, you'll be given an opportunity to respond to the objections and receive questions, and then you get an opportunity to sum up. You can also get an opportunity to sum up. Thank you.
Thank you. Licensing, just to advise Graham that we've licensing committee members have received and thoroughly reviewed a copy of all objections prior to this meeting. It is requested that you keep any explanation to your objection to no more than 10 minutes. Could I ask you therefore to invite you to do your additional grounds for objection or representation should not be added at this time. Only the grounds of your objection and representations included in your initial submission may be referenced. Could I invite you to provide details of your objection?
Thank you. So my name is Grain Forsyth, and thanks for allowing me to make some points today. To give you some context to why I'm sitting here, I've lived in the village with my wife and my 2 boys for 15 years, and in the wider Aberfield area for pushing 25 years now. Both my boys recently finished at Breadalbin Academy and are now in university, and we would like to think that they would come back to the area at some point in the future. I'm also a director of Aberfieldy Development Trust, who are committed to providing affordable housing in the 3 local community council areas and are working closely with lots of stakeholders, including Perth and Kinross in this regard. ADT recently carried out a housing needs survey for the Aberfieldy and wider surrounding area, which clearly identified the negative knock-on effect of second homes and holiday lets on affordable housing options and local businesses. I'm here, however, in my capacity very much as a Strathty interested resident. There is a housing crisis in the village causing significant community concern. I wanted to make my voice heard here today, irrespective of whether the councillors choose to grant or not grant this application. I personally, along with others in the village, feel we have now reached a significant tipping point in terms of the overall demographic. I should also say to the applicant, this is a point of principle for me and others. In no way is a personal attack on the applicant. We know the applicant in passing, and as I say, it's not personal in any manner whatsoever. I did provide you with my list of objections, which you've quite rightly pointed out you've reviewed. I don't propose to read through these in detail. However, there are a couple of updates to some of those points, which I would just like to flesh out. I'll go through them in terms of the order in which I believe you've got them. The first point was there is undoubtedly a housing crisis within the village. People wishing to live and work in the village cannot find accommodation. This is now clearly evidenced across the wider area. And part of that, not the only reason, of course, is that short-term let investors and second homes have lifted the average house price to unaffordable levels for many of the population. I think the second point that I had listed out was we had done a kind of anecdotal analysis of the number of properties in the area, just for our own interest, actually, just to see what the split of permanent residencies versus second homes versus shorter long-term lets was. It's quite disturbing. Now, there is an update in that. I've now carried out an updated set of numbers for that. So the ones that are in the list there are similar, but slightly more onerous in terms of the demographics of the community. We believe there are circa 70 properties between the Pitnacree end and the Findinett end of the village. Permanent residencies are 44%, long-term lets are actually surprisingly high at 19%, which did surprise me. Second homes not without surprise, are sitting at 29%, and short-term lets are currently 9%. And there's 6 if you don't include this application. We believe this application would bring that to 7. So interested in the demographics and the affordability, as the context I set you out before, that from my perspective would bring the percentage of non-permanent homes in Strathtae, by which I mean short-term lets, which is here what we're considering today, but also second homes, non-permanent homes, to 38% in Strathtae. Now, in the context of the Guardian article, which you'll all be familiar about in terms of Aberfeldy and Rannoch having the nationally highest percentage of short-term lets, that was 36%. We're now looking down the barrel of 38% across those two categories. So I think it's pretty damning. I think we need to stand up and be counted. There is a lot of concern in the village about it, but not everyone wants to put their head above the parapet, as you can imagine. It's a quiet place, but I felt I did really want to do that. I then went on in one of the other points to talk about the erosion of community, the viability of local services. Sadly, we're now seeing that evidenced in the village. We are facing, as some of the councillors will know, the loss of our local shop and post office, which has been up for sale now for coming on for a year, and there are no offers for it. And I think some of that, anecdotally, from people we know in the village, including the owner of the property, is there's just not enough throughput of business now. So we are seeing a diminishing set of facilities in the village. And again, you can't blame that completely in short-term lets, clearly, but the overall demographic of the village is eroding the ability of local businesses to be able to survive. I made a brief point about the ability to recruit staff and retain staff. We see that right through the wider area, from teachers of the local schools, but particularly within the Strathtae village. The two primary employers, well, there's actually 3 if you include the chocolate shop, but we would have the chocolate shop, we'd have Ballintaggart, and we would in the Tay, all of whom suffer and find it difficult to retain senior staff because there is no housing in the area. So, I mean, this is a common tale. You'll hear this with many objections, I'm sure, but we are finding essential services being eroded because of the lack of affordable housing. The current application, clearly short-term let, it is a modest property, sits in the heart of the village. We know from the Development Trust Housing Needs survey, the demand for this type of property within a long-term let market would be considerable. We did some numbers very briefly just on the kind of income that was potentially going to be generated by a short-term let. That's not a surprise to anyone. And I do understand why the applicant formerly had this as a kind of second home, why I get completely why you want to maximise your income from your own property. But again, we would make the point that as that kind of level of income becomes available to a short-term let, it's further and further pricing locals out of the ability to have affordable housing in the area. The applicant will no doubt, I wouldn't expect them to do anything else, to point to the proven economic benefit of visitors in a community. The councillors will know now this is a bone of great contention, actually. And Edinburgh City Council's recent piece of work on the economic benefit of short-term let income to a city versus permanent residence has cast some doubt on that. There's a lot of contradictory evidence out there. But we do, again, anecdotally know that most of the short-term let visitors to Strathtae do what you would expect. It was, kind of what I would do if I was going on holiday. You fill your car up at the big Tesco down the road before you get to where you're staying. And we do anecdotally know that typically short-term let visitors to the area aren't spending in the local shop. Again, that's the shop that's under threat. So, I mean, I think hopefully my objections, given the context of who I am, some of my other peripheral interests, are clear. I do strongly believe this is going to have a hugely detrimental effect on the local amenity, businesses, schools and other services that are reliant on permanent residents. The permanent residents, after all, are the people that contribute to the council tax and support those local services. I'll probably stop there. You may or may not choose to grant this for other reasons I'm unaware of, but I very much wanted to have, if you like, the ability to speak to you and to raise some real concerns about where we think this tipping point has now got to. And I say it's in no way personal about this applicant. It's the principle here of watching yet another property tip the scales and contribute to the lack of viability of what should be a thriving little community. So many thanks for your time. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I, before I open up to questions, could I just recap on your objection and maybe just seek some advice? We as a committee aren't taking info. I can't deal with the density of short-term lets within a village. That's not within our remit, is it?
It's more of a wider political issue, or one whether an area should be maybe made like Edinburgh, like a control zone. So unfortunately, it's not something that the committee would normally take into account.
Okay, thank you. Could I therefore ask if members have any questions for Mr. Forsyth? Councillor Frampton? No, she doesn't have a question for you. Is there anybody online got questions for Mr. Forsyth? No, there's no questions for you, Mr. Forsyth. Could I therefore invite Ms. Cooper to provide details of their client's application and respond to the objection?
Thank you and good afternoon. I appear representing the owners of the cottage, Hilary Bruce, Angus Bruce and Alex Bruce at this committee meeting. I am joined by Mr Alex Bruce, who also appears on behalf of all of the owners, Hilary and Angus being Alex's parents. Angus Bruce is also present here today in the public gallery. Mrs Bruce submits her apologies. She underwent surgery towards the end of last week and is therefore recuperating and could not attend today's meeting. The cottage has been used as a short-term let by the Bruce family since May 2023. Accordingly, the application sought is as existing hosts for a 3-year period, and the property is a secondary letting arrangement, as the objection spoke to. The property is a semi-detached house, and it is situated in Strathty near Aberfeldy. It sleeps 6 people within 3 bedrooms. The property is dog friendly, and with all of that in mind, the targeted market is for family holidaymakers. The property is marketed on cottages.com. The family have been allocated a personal account manager to evolve consistent and best practice. When a booking is made, the details of the guests are provided in advance, and the property manager prepares the cottage for all guests prior to arrival and departure. The guests receive advance notice of a secure key box code to obtain entry, and the keys are deposited on departure. When guests arrive at the cottage, both the owner and the caretaker's numbers are stated clearly within the welcome information. Immediate neighbours also have contact details for the family in case of emergency, and friendly contact is maintained with the neighbours, and there have been no adverse reports from any of the neighbouring properties about the property's use or its operation. The family are keen to support local businesses, and with that in mind, they have a local laundry serving for the property and a local gardening and handyman services also in use. Guests are provided with information on the local area and directed to the local amenities also. The property, following positive reviews from guests, was awarded special status as a 5-star experience in January of this year. You will note from the committee report that following the application being sent out for consultation, Police Scotland, Scottish Fire and Rescue Service and the Council's Planning Department have no objections to the application. It is observed, however, and as in attendance today, there have been letters of objections received. It has been contained within the committee report that the committee required to consider whether the objections received relate to the activity of a short-term let licence. That has been touched upon with the legal advice sought by the committee, and I submit that the 3 objections do not fit into any of the confined grounds of objection under the Civic Government Scotland Act 1982, and as you will already know, the committee are not permitted to consider issues which relates to other legislation other than the 1982 Act. Rather, the objections relate to planning considerations more generally regarding the use of the property, and for that reason I submit that the objection should carry no weight in considering this application from a licensing perspective. I wish to further highlight, notwithstanding the above, that the objectors do not live within the immediate vicinity of the property. Mr and Mrs Forsyth are obviously husband and wife, given the same address has been provided by them. They live around half a mile away, which is a 10-mile walk from the property. And whilst the objections attempt to make reference to the cottage in a completely, I would submit as I have, irrelevant manner from a licensing perspective, it should be noted that there's tones of a blanket approach, which also do not speak to the merits of this specific application. The other objector, Mr Porter, again, I just would wish to note, lives 27 miles away from the property, a 37-minute drive, and again, not resident in the local vicinity. His objection, again, is blank in its approach about holiday lets in the vicinity more generally, rather than speaking on the merits of this application. And despite the objections not relating to the activity of a short-term let, the applicants were nevertheless keen to address concerns from the objectors. In that regard, the applicants attempted to engage with the objectors to resolve any concerns. On the 28th of February 2024, the applicants wrote to the objectors to ask if they would be happy to meet to discuss concerns and to better understand matters. A meeting within the village was proposed. After not hearing for a number of weeks, the applicants wrote again, offering to meet the objectors at a specific date when the applicants would be in the village. The objectors did not wish to meet with the applicants, and the tone of the responses were less than friendly too. This was disappointing for the applicants, but nevertheless shows their efforts to engage. I will sum up at the end, but I will obviously in that be moving for the application to be granted.
Thank you, Ms Cooper. Before we move on to any questions, could I ask Karen Engelberts to give additional information regarding the letting period?
Thank you. I just wanted to clear up that you'd mentioned that the property was let from May 2023. However, we have received evidence that the short-term let was let from as early as 16th of February 2021, which would meet the legislated deadline of having let the premises prior to the 1st of October 2022, which does indeed make it an existing let.
Apologies, just for clarification, I just meant specifically by the Bruce family in my representations to the committee.
Okay, thank you. Do you happy to take any questions? Thank you. Do members have any questions? There appear to be no questions. Okay. Just based, one question I would ask is about your neighbours within the property and their ability to contact you. Have you shared your contact details with your neighbours, and on a day-to-day basis, are you living locally, and can you be, if not, who's looking after the property?
Thank you very much for the question. Just to say again, my mother did send her apologies for not being able to attend today because she's recuperating. To answer your specific question, all of the neighbours within the exact vicinity, we have, I think, a pretty good relationship with, and so my mum and dad and myself have shared our contact details with them should there be any kind of issues that ever cropped up. My parents live in Edinburgh, so it's a short, well, relatively short drive away. So to the extent anything is needed, they can be on hand relatively quickly. But yes, we have shared details, and whenever we're up, we have a pretty good relationship with them.
Okay, thank you. Are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, could I therefore invite Mr. Forsyth to sum up, please?
Thank you very much. No, I completely understand that our objections potentially don't fit into the defined grounds. That's fine. I, in some ways, was here to make a different point, which should have been quite obvious. Just to pick up Ms Cooper on one point, we do not live 10 miles away. Perhaps you meant 10 minutes. But in fact, it's less than 5 minutes walk from my house to the golf club. So for the point of record, I am very much an immediate neighbour of the property under consideration. So, but no further comments, thank you.
Could I therefore invite Ms Cooper to sum up, please?
Yes, in summing up the application, looking at the points of consideration, the applicants are not disqualified from being the holders of a licence. The applicants are fit and proper persons to be the holders of a licence. The property is used by holidaymakers frequenting the Strathty area. It's an ideal location for that. There's no adverse history against the property and there's no complaints from anybody in the neighbouring area. The lack of objections from Police Scotland confirms that. The supporting documents accompanying the application confirms that the property is in compliance with the mandatory conditions. The 5-star experience awarded to the property demonstrates how well the property is kept and how positive an experience the cottage is for those visiting the area. Further direction is made to the Civic Government Scotland Act 1982, which has stated that the licensing authority must grant the application unless one of the grounds of refusal exists. I submit to the committee that the licence ought to be granted as none of the grounds of refusal exist. I therefore move the committee to grant the licence for a period of 3 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. You have an additional point to make?
Just one additional point, that a day-to-day manager has been appointed by the applicant who lives in Crieff.
Okay, do members wish to adjourn for further discussion? Yes, so we're going to adjourn. Okay, my motion is to grant the applications for a licence for 3 years with the additional condition that the licence holder must share the contact details of the local management agent with the neighbouring properties. Do I have a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you. Are there any amendments to the motion? If there are no amendments to the motion, the application has been granted. Thank you. Thank you. I think that concludes today's business, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for your time and patience.